Good day. This is Terry Difazio, and you're watching Dial It Up. Today, my guest is a three-time guest. We're happy to have her back on again. This is Rose Sheehan. Rose is the director of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Other Drug Prevention Coalition for Northeastern Hospital in St. Johnsbury, and it's good to have you back on again, Rose.
Thank you, Terry. Nice to be here.
Instead of asking you the title again, I actually wrote it out. So that way I don't have to keep asking you.
It is a long name, and we're looking at changing the name of our coalition because so many people have a hard time remembering it. It is quite long, but
yeah, I was going to say so. The last time we've discussed a couple of different things. I think the first time was tobacco, and the last one was marijuana.
Yes.
Which somewhat ties into this one. Towards the end of the interview, I'll get to it. We're going to be discussing the heroin epidemic, and in your take, you're more in tune with this now, but I remember way back in, I think it was 2002, I think this thing sort of started, didn't it?
Yeah, it sounds about right around that time. Mm-hmm.
And in your opinion, since then, has the problem gone through, has it gone through like, I don't know, an ebb and flow sort of thing, or has it just gotten continuously worse? I
would say ebb and flow. What from my memory and how I've seen it is, and the reason I think of it this way, Terry, is because of DART 2.0. DART 2.0 is a group. It's not really, we don't call it a coalition. It's a group of concerned citizens who get together monthly. But we started way back several years ago, around 2000, 2002, when heroin was becoming a real problem. Mm-hmm. And Bess O'Brien was involved at the time, and she made the movie Here Today, and it was to bring light to the heroin epidemic in the Northeast Kingdom. Mm-hmm. And then it seemed to have kind of sort of gone down, like it seemed to have gotten better or went away somewhat, and then it came back. So DART 2.0 got back together again. We've been together for about a year and a half now, mm-hmm. Trying to work together to see how we can make a difference around this issue. So I have seen it kind of go up and then down and now back up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that all of your different drugs seem to do that. Some people think that this is a Vermont issue, but what I'm finding out is there's a lot of it all over the country.
Right.
For example, there was a show on television. I cannot remember the name of the channel, but it focused on a heroin problem in West Virginia. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, now, this is everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. Do you see it as a socioeconomic issue? Does it seem to affect more a group of poor people, richer people, or whatever?
I think it affects all people.
Okay.
But heroin, when you compare it to cocaine and other drugs, is fairly inexpensive, so people can afford it. So, mm-hmm. But it's not. People who are wealthy are not immune to it.
Right.
It touches all classes and socioeconomic backgrounds.
When I was a counselor at the prison, I told people it didn't matter if you had a PhD or a GED. Mm-hmm. Addiction is addiction is addiction.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you see a lot of that too.
I do.
It is, however, it seems to me it's somewhat odd to see, people that are more educated getting heavily involved in these things. Although it does happen,
mm-hmm.
doesn't it?
It does happen, but when I think about my clients, mm-hmm. the people that I work with, they are people who are of lower. They have lower income. A lot of them don't work. But they also are people who struggle with multiple issues, housing, mental health issues. So those are the people that I tend to work with.
It seems to be an escape for them?
It's an escape, yes, and it's an addiction. Yes, they don't want to feel. Most of them have serious trauma histories, and so they're looking for a way not to feel. Whether they're conscious of that or not always is who knows. But yes, they basically, they don't want to feel. They're in a lot of emotional pain and mental anguish, and they want to escape it.
Yeah, because when I used to put addiction like this, and I'm sure you'll bear me out with this, and I want you to elaborate on this if you want,
Sure.
if you can. But people only take drugs or drink alcohol or do certain things because either it brings pleasure or avoids pain.
Exactly.
And some people really get a rush out of heroin, and other people are just trying to blot out whatever harm it is they feel.
That's right.
Correct?
Yes.
Now, what's some of the worst case heroin addicts you've seen? When I was at the prison, I think the worst one I ever saw was 18 to 20 bags a day.
Yeah, that sounds about the highest I've ever seen. But recently, Terry, not too far in the, like in the last year, I met a young lady who really, I'll never forget her and she wasn't a client or anything. I met her in the community, and she was really suffering because of heroin, and she had injected it in her fingers and in her feet. And so her hands were like all black. She was going to be losing her fingers.
Yeah.
And she was young, and it was just so sad. And we've had several overdoses in St. Johnsbury and throughout Vermont in the past few years.
Yeah. I've often said that the problem with street drugs is the fact that when you do them, you really don't know what you're getting, as opposed to the alcoholic, who basically, when he picks up a bottle of booze, knows what's in that bottle of booze, so he knows what's killing him.
Right.
Or her.
Right.
Whereas,
and fentanyl's is a problem. People are getting heroin laced with fentanyl.
Yeah, I think wasn't it recently they said that's what killed Prince.
Yes.
And I've had fentanyl in a hospital a few times. Now, this is interesting. Maybe you can comment on this one. And I like how this interview is going. It's just sort of morphing into different areas, which is really good. When I had lithotripsy at Dartmouth-Hitchcock back at 2000 to 2002, they gave me a cocktail to knock me out, but was Versed, fentanyl, and propofol. The last time I went down there for my surgeries on my shoulders and my spine, they weren't using the fentanyl anymore. However, at another hospital that I won't name, they're still using the fentanyl in their cocktail. And I'm wondering if Dartmouth figured something out, or they don't want to take the risk of it, because I liked it better without the fentanyl. It didn't give me the hangover.
Yeah, I wish I could answer that, Terry. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I'll have to ask them.
Good question.
Yeah. All I know is without it didn't seem to make a lot of difference as far as knocking you out, and I seemed to feel better when I came out of it. Now, there are different type of opiates that people abuse, and there are street opiates, and then there are prescription opiates. And which one do you see more of?
Street opiates, I would say. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Pills. Medications that people are selling. I see that a lot, and unfortunately, a lot of the people who I hear about and see are people who got addicted to pain medication for a legitimate thing that happened to them, whether it was a car accident, some kind of something, and then when their doctor kind of weans them off of the pain medication, they will go. Some of them will switch over and they'll start using heroin because it does the same thing. And so I've seen that quite a bit.
Yeah, I think I heard it one time. A guy said that originally I needed it for the pain. Then I realized I just needed it.
Right. That's how they feel. That's how they describe it.
Yeah, I know I've had morphine and I've had fentanyl in a hospital setting, and I've had OxyContin and oxycodone post-surgical, and it's easy to see the morphine I didn't like. And the fentanyl in the hospital didn't give you enough to do much of anything but knock you out anyway. But I can see how the other opiates can be quite dangerous to play with. Yes.
Well, the effect is immediate. It hits the brain really quickly. So, boom, you want to feel better. All you have to do is take a pill.
Yeah. Now, is oxy? I said OxyContin or Oxycodone. Is that essentially time-release morphine? Is that what that is?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for all of you out there, after the Civil War, they found out that there was tons of morphine addicts. Mm-hmm. So they came up with heroin. And heroin is essentially morphine with an enzyme that allows it to pass through the blood-brain barrier faster. And they were hoping that if they could get guys off the morphine, they wouldn't become addicts, and it turned out that didn't happen anyway. Didn't happen anyway. So what are the various types of treatments that are out there for opiate addicts?
Well, obviously individual counseling, but in St. Johnsbury, well, actually throughout Vermont, we have BART. We have one in St. Johnsbury. Yes. We have one in Newport, and I believe there's one in Montpelier or Barrie.
They could have expanded, yeah.
Yeah, they have expanded. And so many of my clients use BART as one of their, most important resources, I guess. They go every morning and they get dosed with either methadone or Suboxone. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be a strategy or a medication that helps them to stay away from the heroin or the pills. Mm-hmm. I hope.
Yeah. When I was a counselor, I tried to push the harder cases towards Suboxone rather than methadone because methadone can be rather invasive. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us the difference between the two? I mean, I know the difference, but can you tell the difference?
Why don't I let you explain it, because I don't feel like I will do a very good job.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Well, methadone replaces the cravings. You take methadone and you don't get the cravings. But I've been told by addicts that it's harder to get off methadone than it is to get off heroin.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that.
It's very, very invasive, and it really will mess up your bones and your teeth and everything.
Yes.
Suboxone, from what the literature I've read, is it has a blocker in it.
Yes, sort of like Chantix. When people take Chantix, it blocks those receptors in the brain, and Suboxone does the same thing.
I'm not sure if it's naltrexone or Narcan or something like that. It's one of those type of blockers. Uh-huh. And if you're taking Suboxone, you decide to cheat and not follow the program, and you take opiates on top of it, you'll get pretty sick.
Pretty sick.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have to use the Narcan to, sometimes people will, pass out, die, and they have to use Narcan to bring them back.
Yeah, there was recently a bill about that in Maine. They want to dispense Narcan for addicts who were overdosing, and the governor of Maine vetoed it. I can't wait. Paul LePage. Yes, he said, "Well, it's just going to be until the next time they overdose. So why not let them die?"
Yeah, he doesn't seem to. He doesn't seem to care a whole lot about these issues.
Yeah, well, I'll put it to you bluntly. Couldn't grasp a concept if it bit him in the ass. But then again,
he doesn't seem to have a lot of empathy for people with issues, any kind of problems.
Yeah. Well, I understand, some of the thinking, and for some people that might be true. Mm-hmm. But in the field that I was in and that you're in,
yes,
the whole idea is harm reduction. Mm-hmm. You're trying to help people get better.
That's right.
And hopefully some of them will get it before it kills them.
Yes. Yeah, I have my own concerns a little bit, Terry, about the methadone treatment and Suboxone, through BART, because I have seen some people who will go there and they'll get their dose and then they will go out and use. So I hope the majority of the people who are using it as prescribed and as directed. But there is this risk of people getting their dose there and then going out and using. So I have concerns about that, as many people do. And I also have a concern about people being on it long term. I wonder about, what are the side effects of that long term? But I also see that people really struggle, and this is something that helps them. That it's sort of like even with the nicotine patch. If somebody knows they can have a nicotine patch while quitting smoking, it gives them the courage, okay, then all right, I might be able to do this. And so, and it's the same way with the methadone or with the Suboxone. It kind of gives people that sense of, all right, then with this, maybe there's hope. Maybe I can do this. I just worry about how long they're on it and what are the potential side effects to it.
I can't speak for the people that I treated, but I knew at least 2 or 3 of the 10 or 12 people that I got on buprenorphine or Suboxone that were off it in a year. It worked.
Yes.
It worked well for them. It did what it had to do. It got them over the hump, so the craving stopped. The rest I lost track of, so I don't know. But I was always a bigger proponent of Suboxone than methadone. Some people just ran right for the methadone, and I think part of that is because they're part of the addictive personality.
Sure.
Part of their addiction. Why do you suppose now, after all this time, the opiate problem has resurfaced, or all of a sudden it's getting all this national media attention?
Well, we did have that article in the Rolling Stones that seemed to put a lot of bring attention to Vermont.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's has something to do with it. I feel like it does in some way, because people were talking about Vermont all over the country, probably all over the world, and so someone had to pay attention, and so I might have started there, but also the high cost, what it's costing us to treat people, and the number of people who are incarcerated and all these things. It's very costly to the state of Vermont.
Yeah, and of course, people that are opiate addicts, they're stealing. They're involved in a lot of other negative activity.
A lot of crime.
Crime is involved with it, as opposed to if you're doing buprenorphine or if you're doing methadone and you're actually working the program the way it's designed.
Yes.
You don't need to go out and do those negative things. You don't need to go out and steal.
Correct.
Or rob people or mug people, because this other thing is hopefully helping you.
And when they have it under control, they're back to work.
Yes.
They're doing school. They're with their families, so they do well when they follow the treatment as recommended.
Have you seen the case where an opiate addict says, "Well, I feel okay now. I'm not having my cravings, so I'm going to stop taking my meds"? Have you seen that yet?
I've seen it, not as many times as people tend to stay on it, but I have seen it, and people get overconfident, and they don't want, there's people, it's kind of funny, saying this, about addicts, but there are people who don't want to take medications. They say, they get confident in themselves, and they're like, all right, I got this done, taken care of, and I don't need to do this, I don't want to take medicine, and then shortly thereafter they relapse.
Yeah.
So because they didn't stay on it long enough.
Is there a specific type of therapy that you think works better?
Well, I would say cognitive behavior therapy
CBT,
is critical.
Yeah.
Motivational interviewing is how we get people to really engage in any kind of treatment. So that's really important. And I think person-centered. I truly believe in it, but I also believe in solution-focused. Like a lot of times people who are addicted to opiates or to heroin are they're in rough shape. A lot of them they're homeless. They don't have jobs, so we need to help. We need to use solution-focused strategies to get people's lives back, on track. Because when they, if they just get clean and sober, they're not using heroin, but they're not back to work or they're not, being productive, they're at a higher risk of relapse.
Yeah, and of course, you hit on something very important here, is stopping the drug use is only the tip of the iceberg.
That's just the beginning.
Yeah. You've got to change a lot of things, don't you?
You do. You have to change your whole lifestyle.
Well,
and, this is the thing that I think about with all of these things, tobacco, heroin, alcohol, all of it. What I've noticed is one of the biggest reasons people use is because they don't know how to deal with stress. They don't know how to deal with life. They've smoked or drank or used heroin for a long time. And so you get off of those substances and all of a sudden you have to deal with life. And they don't have the skills.
Coping skills
to be able to do that. And so they get overwhelmed, and that's what typically will lead people back to using. So yes, getting off the substance is only the beginning. Then it's like, all right, how do I create this new life? Who am I? what is my life? What is my purpose?
Yeah.
Who am I? And spirituality is a big one. And, especially a lot of the people that I'm working with right now, we talk a lot about spirituality. And it's really interesting, like just to kind of have these conversations about what do I think life is? What is my purpose? Why am I here? What is this all about?
Yeah.
And I feel and I believe that once people grasp that and they have a good sense of who they are and what direction they're going in their life, then there's a real hope that they'll be able to stay clean and sober.
Yeah, and that that is the initial goal, but not the ultimate goal. Mm-hmm. You got to get them clean and sober. Yes.
Yeah, too.
And then after that, you have to change people, places, and things. You have to. It is.
Yes.
It's like you said, Rose. It's an entire lifestyle change.
Yes.
You can't just. I don't know what you call it, half-ass it.
Right.
You can't just say, okay, well, I'll stop that, but everything else is going to stay the same, because what you'll do is you'll fall back into the same old
you
things.
Can't hang out with the same people. You can't, and they talk a lot about this, like some of them will say, geez, if I even walk down this particular street, I get these strong urges. So they'll have to create a whole plan that says, I don't walk down that street, for a certain amount of time. There's friends who I have to eliminate. We're really fortunate in Vermont, Terry. We have the Recovery Network. And so in many areas around Vermont, we have recovery centers. Mm-hmm. And those are, great, because once people decide they want to be clean, they have a place to go where they can get resources, they can get support, they do lots of activities together. My office happens to be in Dr. Bob's house, mm-hmm. Which is the Kingdom Recovery Center is in the same building. So I get to interact with them a lot, and so I know about a lot of the things they do there. And people come and they'll have movie nights. Right now they're planning a camping trip to go to see Wilson's house.
Okay.
They're doing that. They take cruises together. So that's a place, and we have these around Vermont, where people can build a new life with people who have experienced the same thing and want to live clean and sober. So those are a really important resource that we have in Vermont.
Yes, and you hit on something else that was extremely important too: identification of triggers.
Yes.
Relapse triggers.
Yeah.
Now, do you have? I used to really stress this, and that was to come up with a relapse prevention plan, or an RPP.
Yes.
Do you stress that also?
Definitely. You can't leave treatment without a relapse prevention plan, and then a solid plan for checking in to see how that's going. And it's really important for people who use when they're in treatment to remember or to understand that relapse happens way before a person actually uses. Yeah. It's all about the way we're thinking and what we're doing. So yes, that's very critical. You
have to be able to identify the risk and intervene, because we're talking counseling here. We know this. You're in what they call a relapse cycle.
Yes.
And you have to be able to intervene way before it gets to
way before
here.
It's an emergency way back here. Yeah. That's what I try to get people to think. Just when you get here, that's your emergency. Yeah. When is it an emergency for you? But it's not. It can't be the day after you used. Call me up.
Yeah, right.
Way too late. We want you to call way back here.
and some of the guys that I counseled in the prison, they would say that this was a rough weekend. I wasn't able to identify, I wasn't able to intervene till the last minute. Mm-hmm. He said they called it white knuckling.
Yes.
White knuckling it. They were basically grabbing onto their chair and
Yes.
holding on for dear life.
Yeah.
And that happens too.
Yes.
And
the people I feel for, Terry,
yeah.
like I've come across some people like this who there's people who, when they talk about their drug use or their alcohol use, it actually is a trigger for them.
It can
be,
yes.
For some people, going to NA meetings or recovery groups doesn't work, because it actually triggers them more.
Yeah.
So I feel for them. I feel like those people, they're sort of out there on their own and have to do things kind of differently. I've experienced it with tobacco users also. There's people who cannot come to a group, so we have to do something totally different for them because they can't talk about it.
Yeah, and you bring up another good point too, is the fact that one size doesn't fit all.
Oh yeah.
Does it?
No.
I remember a woman that I knew way before I was a counselor. She was a cocaine and heroin addict, and she said when she would have periodic physicals because she had some other issues, medical issues. When they drew blood from her, she said the needle going in her arm was a huge trigger for her. She said when the needle went in my arm to draw blood, I started sweating because I thought the fun was coming. You know, and so she says I have to really be on my relapse prevention plan every time that sort of thing happens.
Yeah.
I did read a couple of things interesting in the newspaper. One of them was a recent newspaper article was they're talking about using medical marijuana for heroin addicts. I'm going to have to clip it out and find it because I thought that was kind of interesting.
That is interesting. Well, I know many of them tell me that they do smoke marijuana and they speak, you know, they say it helps them. So again, I'm a supporter of it if someone needs it medically. I talked to you the last time and talked about how I don't agree with it recreationally, but hey, if it can help someone medically, and I think we should continue to look at what's safer. You know, what's going to have the least long-term side effects. You know, again, I get a little concerned when I think about people being on methadone for years at it. You know.
Essentially, methadone is more or less a life sentence anyway, most of the time.
Yes, yeah.
Not all the time.
Yeah.
I used to have this argument with people that were heroin addicts. They'd say, well, I'll just smoke a little marijuana. It's like, you know, you're setting yourself up for a relapse. I saw that happen. When you start substituting drugs, then you're setting yourself up to go back to the original drug. There was another thing I didn't get to delve into, but I've heard about it. It's something called ibogaine. Have you heard of it?
I have not.
Supposedly, it comes from some bark of some tree in South America or Africa or something like that, and essentially, it's a lozenge you put under the addict's tongue, and it get 92% cured.
Wow!
It stops it, but it can't get FDA approval for whatever reason. I'm not sure. I will have to look that up. But ibogaine was something I saw on television that looks rather interesting. Is there anything else that you think? Is there anything else that you think?
There is one other thing that I think is important for people to think about, Terry, is the amount of the needles that we're finding in the community.
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, people need to be aware that you know, for their kids or even themselves, we find needles. We actually, as part of DART, organized a committee of people who got trained in how to go and collect the needles and where to bring them, because we were finding them so much in, you know, playgrounds, places where people hang out. And so that's something for people to be aware of and to watch out for.
Yeah, that is kind of a shame that it has to spread all throughout like that, because then you have a lot of innocent people get harmed.
I mean, the risk of HIV and hepatitis, so people should be really careful and be aware of what's around.
Are there any treatment options that haven't been tried that you think really should be looked at? In my opinion, I don't find that education is utilized nearly often enough.
And early enough.
Yes, exactly.
Early enough.
That's just my opinion, and I'm stuck with it.
No, I agree with you. Yeah, I think that we need to. I think in high school, way before high school, kids have to understand what addiction is. I met a couple of young guys who started a campaign called Wait 21. And Wait 21 is about underage drinking, trying to encourage young people not to drink alcohol until they're 21 because of brain development. And they told me that what they found out from their peers is that their peers don't really care about the health effects. They don't even think like that. It's never going to happen to me. But when they talked about what addiction is, and they really understood what that meant, that, you know, if I do this, then it might mean I can never stop doing it. When they understood that concept, it had a bigger impact on them, and they were willing to, you know, postpone using. So I think that's really interesting, and I know for us, our coalition over the next year, we're going to be doing some outreach to schools and to implement this Wait 21 project to see what comes of it. But it's the idea of people understanding addiction versus the health effects that doesn't seem to have the same impact.
Right. Yeah, I know a few guys at the prison told me, they said, I wish I'd have known this when I was, you know, a lot younger. Then at least I probably would have, I may have still done it, but at least I would have had it informed. I would at least had the information to say, you know, should I or shouldn't I?
Right.
but evidently they didn't.
Well, I mean, we know that their brains aren't developed.
Exactly.
So they're at they start using these things at an age when they're not really capable of making great decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's why I feel we need to, as a state, as a society, as a country, we as adults need to take a lot more responsibility to do things like put in policies and make sure there's enough funding for prevention, which we don't do enough of. All those things, so that because kids, they're not quite able, even though they'll tell you they are. They think they're all grown up when they're a teenager, but they're not really capable of making the best decisions.
No, the neural net is not hooked up yet.
Right.
It is still in the process of making all the connections. Rose, I want to thank you for coming on the show, and I know we're going to do this again because there's plenty to talk about. Yes. So I hope you will come back.
And hopefully someday we will say, Rose, I don't need you to come back anymore. Or let's come back and we'll talk about something,
Yes, we'll talk about rose gardens or flower beds or something.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Rose.
You're welcome. Thank you, Terry.
This is Terry Difazio for Dial It Up, saying we hope you all have a good day.